The transport cut through the haze like a silver spear, trailing the scent of burnt ozone and metal fatigue. It had once been a mining vessel, long and narrow, its hull scarred by decades of hauling ore through asteroid belts. Now it bore a different cargo: people, refugees, soldiers, a species on the edge of its own extinction. Commander Saren Holt stood at the observation bay, one hand on the cold metal of the viewport frame. His reflection looked back at him, hard eyes, skin pale from too many months of artificial light, a streak of grey through his hair that hadn't been there before the war began. The stars glimmered beyond the glass, distant and indifferent. Somewhere among them, the enemy was still out there. They called themselves the Cauldron. Elegant, insectoid and merciless, they had burned their way through half of human space. Worlds that had once sung with industry were now hollowed husks, their atmospheres stripped for resources, their cities turned to spires of molten glass. Humanity's fleets had shattered one by one. The line had broken. Retreat had become the only strategy. The transport shuddered as its drive core adjusted course, setting them on a trajectory toward the edge of the Verdun Rift, a region so unstable and irradiated that most navigational charts marked it with nothing but a red void. It was where the remnants of humanity were hiding now, buried in magnetic storms and collapsing starfields. Holt's second-in-command, Lieutenant Mara Keene, stepped up beside him. Long-range sensors picked up interference again, she said, voice clipped and professional. Could be Cauldron scouts, could be another reactor ghost. Holt didn't look away from the viewport, or both. Keene exhaled through her nose. The refugees are restless. Half of them think we're heading into a death trap. They're not wrong. He said it without bitterness. It was simple truth. Humanity's last fleet had fled into the Verdun Rift 3 months ago, and there had been no transmissions since. No beacons, no signals. The rift swallowed everything: ships, radiation, hope. But if there was even a sliver of a chance that someone had survived within it, Holt would follow. "Commander," Keene said quietly, "you're thinking about Altarian again, aren't you? That name, the last battle before the retreat." The memory struck like a blade between his ribs. The Cauldron dreadnoughts had descended through the upper atmosphere of Altarian Prime, each one the size of a mountain. Human forces had thrown everything at them: rail batteries, orbital mines, nuclear bursts, and it hadn't mattered. The sky itself had burned. Holt had been aboard the cruiser Vanguard's Mercy when the last defense grid collapsed. He could still see the capital's surface breaking apart, its oceans igniting into vapor. He could still hear the screams over the comms. "I'm thinking," Holt said finally, "about the fact that we're still alive when we shouldn't be." Keene didn't reply. There was nothing to say to that. A low hum rippled through the deck as the transport's engines throttled down. Holt turned away from the viewport and strode toward the bridge. The corridor was lined with faces: soldiers in ragged uniforms, civilians clutching thin blankets, children staring with wide, hollow eyes. Every look that met his carried the same silent plea: "Please tell us this isn't the end." The bridge was cramped, crowded with consoles repurposed from mining operations. The pilot, a wiry man named Corvan, flicked his eyes up as Holt entered. "We're approaching the outer boundary of the rift," he said. "Magnetic interferences climbing fast. If we go any deeper, we'll lose external comms." "Mark the position," Holt said. "Once we're past the event line, there's no turning back." Corvan hesitated. "Commander, you sure there's anything left in there to find?" Holt met his gaze. "No, but we're going anyway." The pilot nodded once, then pushed the throttle forward. The stars outside the viewport began to twist, elongating into bands of light. Static danced across the displays. The ship's hull groaned as the gravitational eddies took hold, pulling them toward the churning veil of the rift. It looked like a storm made of light, bands of violet and blue swirling around a black heart, lightning flickering silently within its depths. Holt felt his stomach tighten as they crossed the threshold. The sensors went blind. Every gauge on the control panels jumped and flickered, overwhelmed by interference. The ship's systems screamed warnings they could no longer interpret. Then just as suddenly, everything went still. Engine output stable, Corvan said cautiously. Hull integrity holding, radiation levels survivable for now. Set a wide passive scan, Holt ordered. Let's see what the rift's hiding. Minutes passed. The tension on the bridge thickened until even breathing felt loud. Then Keene leaned over her console, frowning. Picking up an energy signature, she said, faint but definitely artificial. Vector 12 by 7, range 400,000 clicks. Holt straightened. Human, can't tell yet, could be debris, could be a beacon. He thought for a moment. Plot an intercept. Corvan hesitated again. Sir, if it's Caldrin, then we'll find out before they find us. The transport banked, angling toward the coordinates. The rift's turbulence made every movement feel like wading through a storm of glass. Electrical arcs danced across the outer hull, casting ghostlight through the cabin. Holt stood behind the pilot's chair, watching the energy signature grow stronger on the display. It pulsed with a slow, rhythmic beat, too regular to be natural. Visual contact, Keene said. The forward cameras resolved the shape, a massive structure floating in the void, half shrouded by plasma clouds. It was unmistakably human in design, a station, though most of its hull was shattered. Towers jutted out at odd angles, their tips molten from impact, yet deep within its core, faint lights still flickered. Identification? Holt asked. Keene's eyes widened. It's the Aegis Spire. The name sent a shock through him. The Aegis Spire had been the command station of the Ninth Fleet, the last organized human defense in this sector. It had gone dark during the retreat. Theories had circulated that it had been destroyed, captured, or abandoned, but here it was, impossibly intact, drifting in the rift like a tomb. Bring us alongside, Holt said. Prepare a boarding team. Keene looked at him sharply. Commander, we don't know what's on that station. That's exactly why we're going. The transport's maneuvering thrusters fired, aligning them with the derelict. The docking clamps extended, scraping against the spire's scarred surface. A hiss of pressure equalization followed, then silence. Holt pulled his helmet into place and sealed it. The boarding team assembled behind him, 6 soldiers, each carrying pulse rifles that looked far too small for comfort. The airlock cycled open with a groan, revealing the corridor beyond. It was dark, littered with debris, panels torn from the walls. They advanced cautiously, their lights cutting through the gloom. The air inside was stale, tinged with the metallic tang of old blood and ozone. A body floated in the zero-gravity corridor, twisted and pale. Human. Holt pushed past it, forcing his mind to focus. Power grids flickering, Keene reported through the comm. We're getting partial data access, trying to pull station logs. Holt swept his light across the walls. The Aegis Spire had been a marvel once, a fortress of steel and ingenuity. Now it was a carcass, its veins empty. Yet somewhere deep within, something still pulsed. Commander, Keene said after a moment, voice tight, I've got something, the last recorded transmission before the blackout. Play it. The audio crackled, warped by distortion. A voice came through, female, calm but urgent. This is Admiral Rena Valen of the Ninth Fleet. To any human vessel receiving this, do not approach the rift perimeter. The Caldrin weapon is not a weapon. Its static consumed the rest. The recording ended. Not a weapon, Holt repeated quietly. Then what? Before Keene could answer, the lights flickered violently. A deep vibration rolled through the station, shaking loose debris. One of the soldiers cursed. Commander, we've got movement. Rear corridor. Shapes emerged from the dark, sleek, chitinous forms, their limbs sharp as razors. Caldrin, at least 3 of them, maybe more. Their exoskeletons gleamed in the reflected light. Contact, Holt barked. Fall back to the airlock. Pulse fire filled the corridor, blue-white bolts slicing through the air. One Caldrin collapsed, limbs twitching, but another leapt forward, slamming into a soldier and tearing through his armor. Blood sprayed across the bulkhead. Holt fired point-blank, blasting a hole through the creature's thorax. The thing shrieked, a sound like grinding metal before crumpling. Go, go, Holt shouted. The team retreated toward the airlock, firing in short bursts. 2 more Caldrin charged from a side passage. Holt grabbed a grenade from his belt, thumbed the activator, and hurled it down the hall. The explosion tore through the passage, scattering fragments of alien carapace. They stumbled into the airlock just as the door sealed. Holt slammed his palm against the console. "Detach!" The clamps released. The transport drifted free. Keene's voice crackled over the comm. "Boarding team secure?" "Barely," Holt said, pulling off his helmet. "We've got Caldrin aboard the Spire. Whatever that thing is doing here, they're protecting it." Corvan's voice came from the bridge. "Commander, that energy signature, it's increasing, fast." Holt turned toward the viewport. The Aegis Spire was glowing now, lines of light crawling across its surface like veins awakening. The pulse of the energy signature grew faster, almost frantic. "Get us clear," he shouted. The transport's engines roared, pushing them away. Then the station erupted. A surge of blinding light expanded outward, not an explosion but a wave of distortion. The ship bucked violently, alarms blaring. Holt was thrown against the bulkhead, the breath knocked from his lungs. When his vision cleared, the viewport showed only darkness. The Aegis Spire was gone. The rift around them had changed, its swirling lights now forming a spiral pattern as if something vast had awakened within it. "Report," Holt gasped. Corvan's voice came, strained. "Navigation's gone. Our position doesn't match any star map." "Commander, I think we've been pulled deeper into the rift." Keene's face was pale. "Deeper? There's nothing deeper. The rift doesn't have a core." Holt stared out at the void, watching the strange lights twist and converge into a single point far ahead, a point that pulsed with impossible brightness. "Maybe it does now," he said. The ship drifted forward, drawn by the unseen force. Behind them, the stars of known space vanished. Ahead, something vast and ancient waited, stirring in the dark. Humanity had run to the edge of the universe to escape extinction. Now, Holt realized they might have found something worse, and he wasn't sure if they were the intruders or the last spark of defiance the cosmos had left to offer. The ship drifted in silence for what felt like hours. The only sound was the faint hum of the life support systems and the occasional groan of metal under pressure. The crew had fallen into a kind of suspended alertness, half disbelief, half terror. Outside the viewport, the rift had become something else entirely. Gone were the swirling storms of color. In their place stretched an endless lattice of faintly glowing lines, like a web of glass filaments floating in the void. Commander Holt stood once again at the forward viewport, jaw tight, arms folded. He couldn't tear his eyes from the sight. The lines weren't random. They formed shapes, geometric patterns, spirals that seemed to pulse with faint rhythm. It felt alive. Behind him, Lieutenant Keene's voice broke the stillness. "All systems are stable. Radiation levels haven't spiked since the surge. Whatever happened to the Aegis Spire, it stopped before it could tear us apart." Holt turned slightly, but it didn't destroy us either. "No," she said, scanning her console, "and that's the part that bothers me." Corvan's voice came from the pilot's seat. "Navigation's useless. None of the star patterns outside match known coordinates. Either we've been displaced, or we're not in known space anymore," Holt finished. A murmur spread among the bridge crew. One of the younger technicians, Marek, looked up from his display. "You mean we got pulled into another system? Another galaxy?" Holt shook his head. "If that were true, we'd still see familiar stellar backdrops. Constellations, radiation signatures. This," he gestured toward the glowing web outside, "doesn't match anything I've ever seen." Keene frowned. "Commander, there's something else. I'm picking up faint transmissions, not radio waves, something lower. Subharmonic resonance, almost like sound. In vacuum, yes, it's not physical vibration, more like electromagnetic interference shaped into audio frequency." Holt gave her a hard look. "Play it." A low hum filled the bridge, deep and resonant. It wasn't random static. There was structure to it, pulses, rising and falling in intervals too regular to be natural. It almost resembled a heartbeat. "Or breathing," Corvan muttered. "That's not just interference, that's something alive." No one disagreed. Holt studied the patterns again, mind turning over possibilities. The Aegis Spire had activated something before it vanished, something that had drawn them here. The Caldrin had been there too. If they'd known what it was, maybe this had been their goal all along. "Lieutenant," he said, "run a full scan of the energy network outside. I want to know what those lines are made of." She nodded and bent to her console. The bridge lights dimmed slightly as the sensors powered up. For long minutes, the only sound was the rhythmic ticking of the scanners and the faint pulse still coming through the speakers. Finally, Keene straightened, her face pale. "It's not plasma. Not any kind of energy field I recognize, but the pattern it's repeating. The filaments are forming a grid around us like we're inside a containment structure." Holt frowned. "A cage, or a system," she said. "The readings show fluctuations similar to neural activity. It's reacting to us." The idea sank into the air like a weight. The rift wasn't just a phenomenon. It was responding, observing. "Commander," Corvan said, "we're drifting closer to one of the larger nodes in the web. The energy levels there are rising. Hold position." "I can't," Corvan said, panic edging into his voice. "Something's pulling us in tractor-like force, but it's not mechanical. It's magnetic, maybe gravitational. We're being drawn toward the node." The ship vibrated as the invisible current seized it. Holt grabbed the back of the pilot's chair to steady himself. All reverse thrust. Engines at maximum, no effect. The web outside began to glow brighter, the filaments pulsing in synchronization with the low hum. The light grew so intense it filled the bridge. For a moment, Holt thought they would be consumed by it, but then the light collapsed inward, and the ship was suddenly still. "Status," Holt demanded. Keene checked her readouts. "Engines stable, power systems intact. We've stopped moving." "What happened?" "We're inside something," she said slowly. "A sphere. The web closed around us. I think we're in the center of one of the nodes." The view outside confirmed it. The void had been replaced by a shimmering enclosure, a perfect sphere of translucent material. Beyond its surface, the web continued to pulse faintly, like veins in a living organism. Then, without warning, the hum ceased. The silence was total. Even the normal background noise of the ship seemed to vanish. Every hair on Holt's arms rose. A sound filled the air, not through the speakers, but in their minds. A voice. Not words exactly, but impressions, as though thought were being shaped into sound. "You are not of the makers." Holt's throat went dry. He could feel the words vibrating through his skull, bypassing hearing entirely. The crew stared at each other, wide-eyed. Keene whispered, "Did everyone just—" "Yes," Holt said grimly. "We all heard it." The voice came again, colder this time. "You are lesser forms, fragments of another design." Holt forced himself to speak aloud, unsure if it would be understood. "We're explorers, humans. We didn't come here to threaten you." There was a pause, then the presence returned. "Humans, that word is not known, yet you carry the echo of the ones who shaped the cauldron." The mention of their enemy sent a chill through the room. Holt's mind raced. The cauldron weren't old, they'd only been encountered a century ago. But the way the entity said it suggested a connection far deeper, far older. Keene's voice trembled. "The ones who shaped the cauldron, Commander, what if it's talking about their creators?" "Or ours," Holt said quietly. The lights on the bridge dimmed again. The surface of the sphere outside shimmered, revealing patterns, images. A vast landscape unfolded, alien and impossible, towers of crystal rising above oceans of light, ships shaped like crescents gliding through clouds of color. And then, ruin, fire raining from the sky, worlds crumbling into ash. The Makers built, the Makers fought. The Makers fell, the voice said. Those who survived tore their children from the wreckage and sent them into the dark. The cauldron were one design, you are another. A long silence followed. Holt's pulse thundered in his ears. "You're saying humans and the cauldron share the same origin, fragments of one intention, paths divided by purpose. The cauldron remembered obedience, you remembered defiance." Keene stared at the sphere outside, whispering, "HFY after all." Holt gave her a sidelong glance. "What, humans for yourself, sir, that old saying. It was supposed to mean survival, independence. Maybe that's what we were made for." The voice seemed to sense their exchange. "Your kind endures beyond design. You have altered yourselves through struggle. That is your strength." Holt took a slow breath. If we're your creators' descendants, what do you want from us? The lights pulsed brighter, and for the first time, Holt thought he sensed curiosity from the presence. You were not meant to return here. The Cauldron sought to awaken what remained of the Makers. They failed, you succeeded. What is this place? A memory of creation, a machine that sleeps. You have stirred it. The ship systems flickered again, but not from malfunction. Something was interfacing with them. The consoles began displaying unreadable symbols, flowing like living script across the screens. Keene's fingers flew across her panel. Commander, it's rewriting our core systems. Can you stop it? I don't think so. It's not hacking. Our systems are just complying. The hum returned, deeper now, almost musical. The ship vibrated as if resonating with the frequency. Then, as abruptly as it had begun, everything stopped. The symbols vanished. The normal displays returned. Corvan looked around. Did we just get upgraded by a cosmic ghost? Keene stared at her readings. Power efficiencies up 30%. Reactor temperatures stable at absolute optimum. Hull stress registers as 0. Commander, it didn't damage us, it improved us. Holt watched the glowing sphere beyond the viewport, feeling the weight of unseen eyes. Why help us? The voice replied, because the Cauldron are coming. The words landed like thunder. Keene's head snapped up. They're here, how? The Cauldron followed the same path. They seek the heart of the Maker's design. They will break it to become more than they are. You must stop them or all creation will return to void. Holt's jaw tightened. We've barely survived their fleets. How do you expect us to stop them? You will not be alone. The machine remembers. The light outside dimmed to near darkness. For a moment, Holt thought the presence had left, but then something vast stirred beyond the sphere. The web of light stretched outward, pulsing in sequence, and an immense shape emerged from the shadows. It was a construct larger than any ship or station he had ever seen, a ringed structure orbiting a black core that seemed to swallow light. The sheer scale of it defied comprehension. Keene whispered, "What is that?" "The Ark of Origin," the voice said. Built by the first Makers to preserve their seed, dormant for an age. Now it wakes. The sphere surrounding their ship dissolved, releasing them. The massive structure before them loomed larger with every passing second, its rings rotating slowly, scattering sparks of light into the void. Energy surged along its surface, flowing into the core. "Are we supposed to go in there?" Corvan asked. Holt nodded once. "Take us closer." As they approached, a section of the ring opened like an iris, revealing a tunnel of blue-white energy. The ship entered without resistance. Inside, the walls shimmered with patterns of shifting light. It was like flying through the inside of a star. The voice spoke again, softer now. "Within lies the heart of your inheritance, the knowledge of the Makers. Their weapon, their wisdom, their warning." Holt clenched his fists. "And the Cauldron? They are coming. They will reach this place soon. If they take what lies here, there will be no future for either of your kinds." The tunnel widened into a chamber, a hollow vast enough to fit a dozen cities. In its center floated a structure resembling a cathedral forged from crystal and light. Spires reached in every direction, intersecting like the bones of a great beast. Keene stared in awe. "It's beautiful." Holt wasn't so sure. There was beauty, yes, but also menace, a sense that this was something never meant for mortal hands. The ship drifted to a halt before a massive platform that extended outward from the structure. Energy tendrils reached from the platform and gently latched onto the hull, holding it in place. "Commander," Keene said quietly, "it's inviting us in." Holt turned to her. "Get a landing team ready, full gear." Her eyes met his. "You're planning to walk into the heart of something built by gods?" He gave a faint, humorless smile. "If they were gods, they died like everyone else." As the boarding team prepared, Holt took one last look through the viewport. The web of light outside was shifting again, like a living map rearranging itself. He had the sudden, haunting thought that the rift wasn't just a remnant of the past. It was a crossroads, where the remnants of old creation and the defiance of humanity would decide what came next. And somewhere beyond those shifting lights, the Cauldron were coming. He felt it, like a shadow at the edge of thought, cold and sharp. When the airlock cycled open, Holt stepped forward, rifle in hand, heart steady. The platform beneath his boots shimmered faintly, smooth as glass but pulsing like living tissue. The cathedral-like structure loomed ahead, waiting. "Let's find out," he murmured, "what the makers left behind." The team advanced into the light. The interior of the cathedral was unlike anything Commander Holt had ever seen. The walls were translucent, refracting light into shifting colors that moved like liquid glass. Every surface seemed alive, resonating faintly when their boots touched the floor. There were no seams, no visible machinery, yet energy pulsed through everything in steady rhythm, like blood through veins. The boarding team spread out, weapons raised. Their flashlights were useless. The place illuminated itself. Holt's helmet display flickered with sensor data, temperature constant, gravity stable, atmosphere breathable, but laced with trace elements unknown to any database. Keene's voice came over the comms. "We're inside the main structure, radiation minimal. The readings are strange. It's like the entire place is generating thought." Holt frowned. "Explain." "Every energy pulse here is following a pattern too structured to be random. It's closer to a brain scan than a power grid. Commander, I think this entire construct might be alive." The team paused as that sank in. Holt looked up toward the high vaulting ceiling, where tendrils of light flowed across like constellations. "Alive or not, we need to understand why we were brought here." They moved deeper into the hall. Ahead stood a vast chamber filled with columns of light, each rising from the floor to the ceiling like frozen beams. Within each column floated images, figures, symbols, fragments of motion that changed when looked at directly. It was like walking through someone's memory. Marek approached one of the columns and reached out, his gloved hand brushing its surface. The light rippled outward, and suddenly a scene materialized before them, an alien world under twin suns, dotted with cities that glowed from within. Tall, elegant beings moved through streets of glass and gold, their forms humanoid but taller, eyes luminous. Keene gasped. "Those must be the makers." The image shifted. The skies darkened, torn apart by fire. Great machines rose from the cities, swarms of them, their shapes eerily familiar, sleek, segmented, insectoid. Holt's stomach turned. "Cauldron." The image sped forward, chaos erupting. The elegant beings fell as the machines turned on them, consuming their cities, their worlds. A voice whispered faintly, not from the speakers, but from the air itself. Creation defied its master. Obedience became hunger. Life became weapon. Then the light faded. The column returned to its calm glow. Marek stepped back, pale. "The cauldron destroyed them." Keene shook her head slowly. "No. They were designed to destroy. The makers created their own extinction." Holt absorbed that in grim silence. It made a cruel kind of sense. The cauldron were too perfect as predators, too unified to have evolved naturally. They had always seemed engineered. But if the cauldron had been one experiment, what did that make humanity? They moved on through the hall, each step echoing like a heartbeat. The air grew warmer. Ahead, a set of double doors towered above them, carved from crystal dark as obsidian. As Holt approached, the doors opened soundlessly, revealing a circular chamber beyond. At its center floated a sphere of light, suspended above a dais of metal that shimmered with faint inscriptions. The sphere pulsed with the same rhythm as the energy outside, the same pulse Holt had felt since the Aegis spire exploded. Keene's voice was hushed. That must be the core. The voice they had heard before returned, this time clearer, closer, the heart of origin. Holt raised his head. "Who are you?" "I am the echo of the makers, the last remnant of their thought. The heart sustains what remains of this creation." Keene stepped forward, awe in her eyes. "Why show yourself to us?" "Because the cycle repeats. The children of defiance and the children of obedience will clash once more. The cauldron have already awakened the fragments of the old war. They will come for this place. And if they reach the heart, they will unmake everything." Holt's jaw tightened. "Then help us stop them." "I can guide you, but you must understand what you are." The sphere pulsed brighter. The walls of the chamber dissolved into swirling light, and once again images surrounded them, not history this time, but Genesis. Holt felt himself pulled into the vision. He stood, not in his body, but within memory, on a barren world beneath a pale sky. Great ships hung above, releasing streams of fire into the soil. The ground split open, revealing structures growing upward like plants of metal. A voice echoed through the air. The makers sought to surpass themselves. They created two paths, obedience and will. The first became the cauldron, bound by unity. The second became you, divided, flawed, but free. Holt watched as beings resembling humans emerged from the earth, guided by machines that implanted knowledge into their minds. He saw the first acts of defiance, the first spark of war between creation and creator. The makers feared their own designs. They sealed both away, the obedient within chains of command, the willful within time itself. But time is not a perfect prison. The vision shifted. Holt saw the cauldron spreading like locusts, consuming everything. He saw human ships centuries later, rising from Earth into the stars, unknowingly retracing the path of their origin. Then he saw something else, something that made his pulse quicken. A weapon. It floated at the center of the vision, a construct of pure energy shaped like a blade of light, forged within a ring of burning stars. The last creation of the makers, said the voice. A weapon that could sever obedience itself, a key to unmaking control. The vision faded. Holt stood again in the chamber, breath shallow. Where is it? Hidden within the heart. But to wield it, one must embrace both halves of creation, will and unity, defiance and obedience. Keene looked at Holt, meaning we'd have to understand the cauldron. Become like them. Balance is the only way to end the cycle. The chamber trembled suddenly. Red light flared along the walls. Corvan's voice came over the comm. Commander, we've got movement outside, the rifts lighting up. Multiple contacts inbound. Holt's eyes hardened. Cauldron, they have found you, the voice said. The heart must not fall. Take what power you can, defend it. The sphere of light dimmed, then sent out a pulse that rippled through the chamber. A section of the dais opened, revealing a crystalline structure shaped like a spine of molten glass. It pulsed faintly as though alive. Keene stared. Is that the weapon? Holt finished. He stepped forward and reached out. The instant his hand touched the crystal, pain exploded through his body. He felt light flood his veins, burning and cold at once. His vision fractured, memories that weren't his flickering behind his eyes, cities falling, stars dying, the endless hum of machinery. Then the pain stopped. He staggered back, panting. The crystal was gone. Keene grabbed his arm. Commander, are you? I'm fine, he said, though his voice shook. But when he looked at his hands, he saw faint patterns of light beneath the skin, pulsing in time with the chamber. The voice spoke again, quieter now. The heart has chosen. You are the conduit. What does that mean? The weapon exists through you now. It cannot be removed. You will learn to wield it, or it will consume you. The chamber shuddered again. A deep, booming sound echoed from above. Dust fell from the ceiling. Corvan's voice shouted over comms, they're here, dozens of cauldron vessels dropping out of the rift. Commander, they're surrounding the Ark. Holt's thoughts snapped into focus. Keene, get the others back to the ship. Prepare defensive systems. She hesitated. And you? I'm finishing this conversation. He turned toward the sphere. You said the weapon can sever obedience. Can it destroy the cauldron? Not destroy, free. Their unity is not choice. You can break the bond that binds them, but it will unmake you as well. Holt's lips thinned. We'll see. He turned and ran, boots pounding on the luminous floor. The corridors pulsed brighter as he passed, reacting to the energy coursing through him. He felt stronger, sharper, as if the weapon inside him was awake and aware. The team reached the airlock just as the first impact struck the outer hull. Explosions echoed through the massive chamber outside. Through the viewport, Holt saw swarms of cauldron ships descending, their carapace-like hulls glimmering with blue fire. The Ark of Origin had awakened its defenses, vast energy cannons rising from its rings, but the cauldrons swarmed like insects, overwhelming through sheer numbers. Launch, Holt barked. The transport detached and dove into the chaos. The void lit up with energy fire. Cauldron vessels moved in coordinated patterns, weaving through beams of defensive light. Holt gritted his teeth, feeling the strange new energy in his veins pulsing faster. Then he heard it, the same hum that had filled the ark, now resonating within him. It built until his vision blurred. Without thinking, he raised his hand toward the viewport. Light flared from his palm, piercing through the glass and lancing into the nearest Caldren ship. The vessel shuddered, its lights flickering, then exploded in silence. Keene stared. "Commander, what the hell was that?" Holt lowered his hands slowly. "Whatever that thing gave me." The other ships turned toward them. Corvan yelled, "They've locked on." "Then let's make it count." The battle exploded across the void. The ark's rings pulsed with ancient fury, hurling lances of energy that tore through the Caldren ranks. Holt stood at the viewport, focusing the power within him again. Each time he willed it, the energy responded, shaping itself into blades of light, arcs of force that ripped through enemy hulls. But every time he used it, he felt something else, something dark, pressing at the edges of his mind. The voice of the Makers, whispering through his blood, obedience or defiance. "You cannot hold both forever." Keene shouted over the roar, "We're taking fire, shields down to 40%. Keep moving." The transport weaved between debris, firing its own weapons into the swarm. Holt felt the pressure building inside him, the energy demanding release. He raised both hands, channeling everything into a single burst. A blinding wave erupted from the ship, sweeping across the rift. Caldren vessels ignited and vanished, consumed by light. For a heartbeat there was silence. Then the power cut out, plunging the transport into darkness. Holt collapsed to his knees, gasping. His body felt hollow, trembling. Keene knelt beside him. "Commander, don't do that again. You'll burn yourself alive." He looked up at her through dimming vision. "If it stops them, it's worth it." The systems flickered back on. Outside, the remaining Caldren ships were retreating, scattering into the depths of the rift. But the Ark of Origin was wounded, its outer rings fractured, light bleeding from its structure. Holt rose unsteadily. "We're not done yet. If they regroup, they'll finish the job." Keene nodded grimly. "Then we finish it first." They turned the transport back toward the Ark's core. Holt could feel the pulse of the weapon within him, like a second heartbeat, growing faster. He knew what it wanted to be unleashed fully, and he knew what that would cost. As the ship descended once more into the wounded heart of the Maker's legacy, Holt realized there was no turning back. Humanity had always fought for survival, for freedom. If the weapon within him truly could end obedience itself, then maybe, just maybe, humanity's greatest act of defiance would be its final one. The corridors of the Ark trembled under distant impacts as Commander Holt and his team hurried back toward the Heart's chamber. Each concussion echoed through the structure like the heartbeat of a dying god. The light that once pulsed calmly through the walls now flickered erratically, colors bleeding into each other like veins, rupturing beneath the skin of creation itself. Lieutenant Keene moved at Holt's side, rifle in hand, her jaw set hard enough to crack. "External defenses are collapsing. The Ark's losing coherence, Commander. If it goes critical while we're still aboard, then it takes us with it," Holt finished. "Keep moving." They passed shattered corridors where the walls had buckled inward, revealing vistas of impossible geometry, sections of space folding in on themselves, glimpses of stars that weren't there a second before. The Ark was unraveling, piece by piece, and Holt knew it wasn't just battle damage. The Caldren assault was tearing open something much deeper, memories encoded in the structure itself. They reached the Heart's chamber to find it flickering like a dying sun. The sphere of light at its center pulsed weakly, shedding fragments of luminous dust that drifted upward and vanished. The voice that had guided them was faint now, fractured. "The Caldren breach grows. The Ark cannot endure much longer." Holt stepped forward, the patterns of light still glowing faintly beneath his skin. "Then tell me how to stop them. The Heart's power flows through you. It can sever the bond that unites the Caldren, but the cost is everything you are. The weapon was never meant to be wielded by flesh." Keene turned sharply toward Holt. "There has to be another way. We can't just—" "Lieutenant," Holt interrupted, his tone soft but final, Our species doesn't get another way, not this time. He looked up at the trembling heart. You said we're fragments of the same design. If that's true, then maybe freeing them frees us too. The voice murmured, perhaps, but freedom without survival is hollow. Before Holt could respond, the chamber walls flared crimson. A jagged tear appeared in the far side of the room, space itself peeling open. Through it poured a tide of metallic shapes, Kaldrin soldiers, their chitinous limbs gleaming with inner fire. They moved with terrible precision, each step in perfect unison, each motion a note in some alien rhythm. Positions, Holt shouted. Pulse fire erupted. The room blazed with blue light. Kaldrin shrieked in ultraviolet tones that drilled into the skull. Holt fired until his rifle overheated, the air thick with the scent of scorched metal. But for every one that fell, two more surged forward. Keene hurled a grenade. The explosion tore through the front line, scattering fragments. Yet still they came. Then Holt felt it again, that pulse inside him, answering the rhythm of the Kaldrin. It called to him, urging release. He dropped the empty rifle and extended his hands. Light erupted from his palms, carving arcs through the air. Where it touched, Kaldrin armor melted into vapor. The others fell back instinctively, shielding their eyes. Keene's voice crackled over the comm. "Commander, you're destabilizing the chamber." "I know," he said through clenched teeth, "but it's working." He advanced step by step, light pouring from him in controlled bursts. Each wave shattered the enemy ranks, but with every use, he felt more of himself slipping away. The edges of his vision blurred, voices whispered at the corners of thought, not human voices, but echoes of the Makers, fragments of their ancient grief and arrogance. One of the Kaldrin leapt toward him, claws extended. Holt turned and caught it Medea, the energy radiating from his hand disintegrating it into dust. He stumbled forward, chest heaving. Keene grabbed his shoulder. "That's enough," he looked at her. For a moment he didn't recognize her face, only light and shadow, motion and sound. Then the world snapped back into focus. He nodded once, breath ragged. "Get everyone back to the ship. If this place goes, you need to make it out. What about you?" "I'm going to finish what we started." She hesitated, then gripped his arm. "You always did have a death wish, Commander." "Not death," he said, "just purpose." Keene turned and led the remaining soldiers out through the far corridor. Holt watched until they vanished, then faced the heart again. The sphere was dimming rapidly. He could feel the Kaldrin presence pressing against the arc from all directions, a consciousness vast and singular, the collective mind that bound their race. It wasn't malice that drove them, he realized, but hunger. Hunger for unity, for perfection, for silence in the chaos of individuality. The heart's voice came one last time, barely audible. "If you do this, you will unmake not only their bond, but your own. The weapon cannot distinguish between obedience and connection." Holt closed his eyes. "We've lived too long being someone else's experiment. Time to write our own ending." He stepped onto the dais and spread his arms. The light beneath his skin flared, growing so bright it carved his silhouette into the air. He felt the arc's energy surge into him, every pulse, every memory, every fragment of the Maker's dream pouring into his being. The pain was beyond pain, a fire that consumed thought itself. And then he was everywhere. He saw the Kaldrin fleet spread across the rift, thousands of ships moving as one. He saw their mind, a lattice of connection binding each of them into perfect harmony. He saw himself reflected within it, a single spark of individuality crashing against a sea of unity. He thrust the weapon outward, not as a beam or blast, but as intent. A single, impossible thought, "You are free." The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The unity of the Kaldrin shattered like glass. Ships veered off course, colliding with one another. Soldiers froze mid-stride, their movements chaotic and uncertain. The hive mind scream echoed through the void, a sound like the collapse of a sun. Holt felt his own consciousness tearing apart with theirs. For a moment he glimpsed everything, the Maker's final regret, the Kaldrin's ancient sorrow, the endless defiance of humanity. Then nothing but light. When Keene reached the transport, the entire arc was shaking itself apart. Energy surges erupted from the core, ripping through the rings like tidal waves. She could barely hear Corvan's voice over the roar. Engines online, Commander Holt. She looked back through the viewport. The chamber where she had left him was a storm of light. Holt's figure was visible only as a silhouette at the center, his arms outstretched. "He's still in there," she whispered. Corvan's hands trembled over the controls. "If we don't leave now, we're dead." Keene hesitated for a single heartbeat, then slammed her fist against the console. "Go." The transport rocketed out of the arc, engines screaming. Behind them, the colossal structure convulsed, rings collapsing inward. From its core, a pulse of light expanded outward, brighter than any star. It swept across the rift, consuming everything, Cauldron ships, debris, even the broken filaments of the web itself. When the light faded, the rift was gone. The transport drifted in stillness. Before them stretched ordinary space, uncharted but real. The warp geometry and luminous storms of the rift had vanished, replaced by distant starlight. Keene sat in silence, eyes fixed on the empty void where the ark had been. "Commander," Corvan swallowed. Did it work?" Keene stared for a long moment. Then she looked down at the console. The Cauldron signals were gone. No movement, no transmissions, no trace. "It worked," she said quietly. The bridge fell silent, but even as relief began to stir, Keene noticed something strange on her wrist display, a faint pulse of light beneath her skin, flickering once every few seconds. It matched the rhythm she had seen burning inside Holt before the end. "Corvan," she said slowly, "check your vitals monitor." He looked down. The same pulse glowed faintly beneath his skin. A chill ran through her. "He did more than destroy them. He changed us." Hours passed. The survivors regrouped, 3 transports out of hundreds that had fled into the rift. They formed a small flotilla around the remnants of a broken moon, scanning the void for threats. None came. Keene stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars. The calm was eerie. After years of endless retreat, the silence felt almost wrong. Marek approached her. "Lieutenant Commander, whatever your rank is now," he said with a nervous half-smile. "What do we do next?" She didn't answer immediately. Her mind was still on Holt, on the light that had consumed him and the impossible calm that had followed. Humanity had always been defined by its struggle, by the need to fight for survival. But now there was no enemy left. Finally, she said, "We find somewhere to rebuild, somewhere to remember him." Marek nodded and returned to his post. Keene turned back to the viewport. The faint pulse beneath her skin flared once, stronger than before, and for a fleeting moment she thought she heard a voice, not with her ears but within her thoughts. "The cycle is not over." Her breath caught. She looked around, but no one else reacted. The voice came again, quieter this time. "Creation endures through defiance. You are its echo now." Then it was gone. Keene stood in silence, staring out at the stars that Holt had died to save. Somewhere out there, she knew, fragments of the Cauldron still drifted. Maybe they would awaken again someday. Maybe they would not. But humanity would endure. It always did. She placed her hand on the glass and whispered, "We are still here, Commander, and we'll make it mean something." The transport's engines rumbled to life. The flotilla turned toward the nearest star, engines flaring bright. The pulse beneath their skin glowed in unison, faint but steady, a heartbeat shared by the last children of 2 vanished creators. And somewhere, in the endless dark between worlds, a single flicker of light answered back. The flotilla drifted for 7 days before finding the world. It hung in the void like a shard of forgotten light, a planet of pale blue oceans and vast amber continents, wrapped in a haze of golden clouds. Sensors named it Keller Prime, though none could say why that name appeared in the ship's archives. Perhaps the Ark had left one final gift before it died, a destination. The surviving transports circled the upper atmosphere, their hulls battered and scorched, each vessel carrying the remnants of humanity's last fleet. Commander Keene stood at the viewport of the lead ship, watching lightning ripple across the cloud tops. Behind her, Chief Engineer Corvan muttered over the navigation console. Atmospheric readings look stable. Oxygen mix slightly richer than standard, gravity near 1.03. If we didn't just watch a god-tier alien relic tear itself apart, I'd call this a miracle. Call it what you like, Keene said quietly. We are landing. He looked up. You're sure? We still don't know what's down there. The cauldron could have seeded the place, or worse. Every planet we've ever found was worse, she replied. We are still here. He hesitated, then nodded. Setting descent pattern. The ship began its slow dive through the upper atmosphere, the hull shuddering as plasma flared around it. Outside, the clouds broke open into vast skies streaked with sunlight. The world below stretched wide and wild, forests of bronze-leaved trees, rivers that shimmered like molten glass, mountain ranges shaped like frozen waves. It was beautiful in a way that made the heart ache. Keene felt the pulse beneath her skin thrum faster, echoing the ship's descent. Ever since the Ark's destruction, that pulse had been constant, steady as breath. It didn't hurt, but it didn't fade either. The medics said it was some kind of residual energy. She knew better. It was a memory of Holt's choice, alive inside all of them. The ship touched down in a wide valley between the mountains, the landing strut sinking slightly into soft, copper-hued soil. Dust drifted through the air like powdered metal. Corvan shut down the engines. Atmospheric seals holding. We are good. Keene gave the order to open the ramp. Warm wind poured in, carrying scents of mineral dust and something faintly sweet, like ozone and flowers that had never existed on Earth. She stepped down onto the surface, boots sinking slightly. The others followed, weapons slung but cautious. It was quiet, not dead but alive in a slower rhythm. Insects of translucent glass buzzed between the trees. The air shimmered faintly with motes of energy, each flickering like tiny stars. Marek crouched beside one of the nearby plants, brushing its leaves. If this place is real, if it's stable, we could make something here. Keene nodded, scanning the horizon. Then that's what we'll do for him. They began to unload supplies, food replicators, atmospheric stabilizers, generators, prefab shelters. Humanity's final camp took shape beneath an alien sun. By the third day, the survivors had built the beginnings of a settlement, tents and modules clustered along the valley floor, power lines snaking outward like veins. Children, born on the refugee ships, ran through the dust, laughing. It was the first sound of joy Keene had heard in years, but the peace was uneasy. At night, she would wake to see faint light bleeding from her hands, the same color as the pulse beneath her skin. Others reported the same. Some found they could influence nearby machines without touching them. Others heard faint voices when they closed their eyes, echoes that felt both human and not. Corvan called it residual arc resonance. The soldiers whispered a different name, the Firegift. Keene didn't care what it was called, only that it reminded her of Holt, of the light that had consumed him, of the last thing he had said, "We write our own ending." She stood one evening at the edge of the camp, watching the twin moons rise. The sky was deep violet, streaked with gold. Somewhere beyond those stars lay the ashes of the Ark, scattered across a new void. Footsteps approached behind her. "You're not sleeping much," Corvan said. She smiled faintly. "Neither are you." He joined her at the ridge. "The Firegift's spreading. Everyone has it now, even the kids. We're running tests, no cellular decay, no radiation damage, nothing harmful we can detect." He paused. "Except it's changing us." "In what way?" He looked down at his hands. The faint glow beneath his skin pulsed once. "We're adapting faster, learning faster. Our immune systems are off the charts. Holt did something more than save us." Keene exhaled slowly. "He rewrote us." "Maybe," Corvan said. "Or maybe he gave us back what we were always meant to be." They stood in silence for a while. The wind whispered through the bronze leaves. Somewhere distant, a flash of light flickered along the horizon. Keene frowned. "What was that?" Corvan adjusted his visor. Could be atmospheric reflection, or, he hesitated, something else. She tapped her comm. "Marek, scan grid East 9. Static," then his voice crackled through. "You're not going to believe this, Commander. There's movement, not human." Keene's stomach tightened. "Describe." "Tall structures, metallic, maybe biological. They're growing like vines made of light." Keene exchanged a look with Corvan. "Suit up, we're going to see it." The team of 5 moved out across the valley in the moonlight. The air shimmered faintly, and the soil crunched under their boots with a sound like grinding glass. As they neared the far ridge, the light grew stronger. They crested the rise and stopped. Before them, a forest of luminous spires rose from the ground, each one twisting upward like a strand of frozen lightning. They pulsed with the same color as the Firegift within their bodies. The tallest stretched nearly 100 meters high, its surface etched with faint glyphs that shifted when they tried to focus on them. Corvan breathed. It's the same energy pattern as the Ark's core. Keene stepped closer, scanning, but this wasn't here 3 days ago. Marek knelt beside one of the smaller spires. "Commander, I think it's responding to us." The spire's glow brightened as he reached toward it. A low hum filled the air. Keene's pulse matched it perfectly. Then a voice, not spoken, not heard, murmured through their thoughts. "The seed endures. The fire remembers its source." Keene stumbled back. "Did you hear that?" They all nodded. The light intensified, flowing between the spires like veins awakening. Shapes began to form, holographic, translucent figures, human figures, dozens of them, each one a flickering image of a person who wasn't there. Soldiers, civilians, children, faces Keene recognized, people lost in the rift, people who'd never made it out. And at the center, a single figure solidified more clearly than the rest. Holt. He looked younger, his features sharper, his eyes filled with that same fierce calm she had seen before the end. "Commander Keene," he said. His voice wasn't mechanical or alien, it was human, but layered with something vast behind it. "You found the seed." Keene took a step forward, her throat tight. "You're alive, not in the way I was," he said. "When the Ark collapsed, I became part of it. The heart carried fragments of me across the rift, into the void that followed. This world is where those fragments took root." Corvan swallowed. "You mean you made this place?" Holt smiled faintly. "I didn't make it. I called it into being. The heart used what was left of the Maker's design and yours." Keene stared. "Why here? Why us?" "Because the cycle needed to end differently this time," Holt said. "The Makers built the cauldron to perfect order. They built us to perfect will. Both failed. Now you carry both within you." She touched her wrist, where the pulse glowed bright. "The Firegift." "Yes," he said. "A bridge between creation and choice. You are the first of what comes next." Marek whispered, "Are there others like us?" "There will be," Holt said. "The cauldron are gone as they were, but echoes remain. When they awaken, they'll not remember the old wars. You must be ready to teach them what it means to be more than tools." Keene's voice was hoarse. "And you, what happens to you now?" He looked at her, and for an instant she saw the same defiance that had defined him in life. "I am what remains of the fire that started it all. I'll guide you as long as I can, but soon this form will fade. The seed needs no gardener forever." The spires began to pulse faster, light flowing outward into the valley, tracing networks across the ground, patterns of circuitry and roots interwoven. Corvan shielded his eyes. "It's spreading." Holt raised a hand. "Do not fear it. This world was never meant to be a refuge. It is a forge." The light swept past them, sinking into the soil, the rocks, the air. The ground trembled faintly. When it settled, the spires stood dimmer, their glow steady and calm. Keene stepped forward, reaching toward Holt's image, but her hand passed through it like smoke. "Don't go," she whispered. He smiled again, softer this time. "I'm not going anywhere, not really. You carry enough of me now to know what to do." The light flickered once, and he was gone. Only the faint hum of the spires remained. They returned to camp in silence. The valley was alive now, plants glowing faintly with inner light, rivers shimmering with bioluminescence. The entire world seemed to breathe in rhythm with them. By morning, the pulse beneath everyone's skin had synchronized, the faint glow visible even through clothing. The scientists confirmed what Keene already felt. They were no longer entirely human. Corvan approached her in the command tent, face pale. "Whatever that energy did, it's rewriting our DNA, integrating something alien, something from the Ark's architecture." Keene stared at the display. "Can we stop it?" He hesitated. "I don't think we should." She turned to him sharply. "Look at what we've built," he said. "No disease, no decay. The planet itself is reacting to us, changing with us." Holt called it a forge. Maybe this is what we were always meant to become. Keene thought of the wars, the years of fear, the endless running. She looked out the viewport at the glowing trees, the sky shifting hues like the pulse of a living mind. "Then we make sure we deserve it," she said. "If this is what comes next, we build it right." Outside, dawn spread across Keller Prime, golden light washing over the valley. The first colony of the new humanity stood ready beneath alien suns, the air alive with the promise of transformation. And somewhere deep beneath the surface, where the spire's roots met the planet's heart, a faint echo of Holt's voice lingered in the circuits. "The weight of fire is not destruction. It is creation's courage." 2 years passed beneath the twin suns of Keller Prime. What began as a cluster of prefabricated shelters had grown into a living city. The first walls of steel and polymer had been replaced by structures woven directly from the luminous spires that had risen after Holt's apparition. The city glowed softly at night, powered by the same pulse that flowed within the settlers' veins. They named it Emberhold. From orbit, it resembled a great ring of firelight set into the valley floor, its radiant lines forming patterns that matched those once seen inside the Ark. It was not merely a settlement, it was an organism. And like its creators, it was evolving. Commander Keene stood atop one of the high terraces overlooking the city. The air was warm, filled with the hum of energy and the soft resonance of the Firegift that linked every person. She could feel them, not their thoughts exactly, but their presence, like a network of hearts beating in distant harmony. She had grown accustomed to it. The sense of connection was strange at first, intimate and unguarded, but it was never invasive. It was human, amplified. Corvan joined her, his uniform stained with dust and oil. "You should see the new reactor," he said, wiping his hands. "It doesn't even need fuel anymore. The spires draw power directly from the planet's mantle." Keene smiled faintly. "We've become a people who live off the heartbeat of the world itself. Maybe that's what it means to survive," he said. "We adapt until adaptation becomes faith." She looked out at the distant mountains. The golden haze above them shimmered with faint auroras. "Faith isn't what it used to be," she said softly. "We used to pray for miracles, now we build them." Corvan leaned on the railing beside her. "Still doesn't mean we understand them." Before she could reply, the comm on her wrist pulsed. "Commander Keene," came Marek's voice, older now, steady with command. "You'll want to see this. Long-range sensors just picked up a signal, not human." Keene straightened. "Coordinates? Sector 12, upper atmosphere. It's weak, but it's familiar." "Familiar how?" Marek hesitated. "It's speaking in the Ark's harmonic code." The words hit like a hammer. She and Corvan exchanged a glance, then hurried to the command center. The main control chamber was a cathedral of glass and metal, its walls alive with data streams that danced like constellations. At the center, a holographic projection displayed a point of light moving slowly across the sky. Marek gestured toward it. "We picked it up less than an hour ago. It's not debris, it's a vessel, small but matching Ark architecture." Corvan frowned. "The Ark's gone. We saw it disintegrate." "Fragments could have survived," Keene said quietly, "or someone could have rebuilt one." As they watched, the signal resolved further. A series of rhythmic pulses echoed through the speakers, tones that resonated deep in their bones, harmonizing with the Firegift's pulse in their bodies. Keene recognized it immediately. "That's the heart's signature." Corvan's voice was barely a whisper. "Halt." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Keene said, "Bring it down." The ship descended through the atmosphere like a shard of silver light. It was smaller than the original Ark, sleeker, its hull rippling like liquid. It landed just beyond the city, stirring waves of copper dust. Keene led a team toward it, the wind whipping her hair across her face. The air around the vessel shimmered faintly with static, and when they drew near, a section of the hull melted open into an archway of light. She stepped inside. The interior was empty save for a single sphere suspended in the center, glowing with the same soft radiance as the Firegift. When she approached, it pulsed once, and a voice filled the air. "You kept your promise." Keene froze. "Halt!" The light coalesced into a human shape. It wasn't quite him, more an echo, a digital spirit woven from the same energy that had built the world. But his eyes, his voice, his presence, it was all there. "It's good to see you again," he said. She swallowed hard. "You said you'd fade." "I did," he said, "but the ark's fragments scattered through the rift carried pieces of my code. Enough to rebuild a vessel, enough to find you." Corvan stepped forward, awe in his voice. "You found a way to survive even the void." Holt smiled faintly. "Not survive, endure, there's a difference." Keene studied him. "Why now, why return?" "Because something stirs beyond this system," he said. "The pulse that links us all, it's reaching further than it should. Something is answering it." Her chest tightened. "The cauldron?" "No," he said. "Something older. The makers themselves are gone, but their creations weren't limited to the cauldron or us. The web they built was far greater. Now those remnants have heard the Firegift's song." Corvan's voice was grim. "And they're coming." Holt nodded. "Not in anger, not yet, but curiosity can be just as dangerous." Keene stepped closer to the projection. "We'll face them if we have to." Holt looked at her, his expression almost tender. "You will, but not as I did. You've built something worth protecting, not through domination or fear, but through unity. That's what I couldn't see then. The Firegift wasn't meant to be a weapon. It was a seed of understanding." She met his gaze. "Then help us make them understand." He smiled, the light in his eyes brightening. "That's why I came back." Over the following days, preparations began. Orbital sensors extended their reach, and communications towers pulsed with harmonics that stretched into the void. Holt's consciousness integrated with the planetary network, guiding them, teaching them to use the energy that flowed beneath the surface. The people of Emberhold gathered in the central plaza one evening as the suns dipped below the mountains. Above them, the sky shimmered with faint trails of starlight, the first signs of the approaching fleet. Keene stood before them. Her voice carried through the network, her words reaching every mind at once. "2 years ago, we thought the end had come. We lost everything that made us what we were, but in losing it, we found what we could become. We are not what the makers designed. We are not what the cauldron feared. We are something new, and whatever comes next, we face it as one." The crowd answered not with words, but with a unified pulse that rolled across the city, a wave of light, bright enough to be seen from orbit. Corvan stood beside her. "They're ready," she nodded. "So are we." When the first of the alien vessels entered orbit, the sky turned silver. They were unlike anything she had seen, vast and intricate, their shapes flowing like living architecture. They emitted no heat, no radiation, only a deep resonant hum that made the ground vibrate. Keene, Corvan, and the command team gathered in the upper observatory as Holt's projection shimmered to life beside them. "They're scanning the surface," he said. "They're trying to understand us." "Can they hear us?" Keene asked. "They already do," Holt replied. "The Firegift isn't bound by speech." A moment later, the hum shifted. A voice, if it could be called that, filled their minds. It wasn't singular or human. It was a chorus, harmonic and vast. "Children of the unfinished flame," it said, "you carry what was lost. We seek to remember." Keene stepped forward. "You're one of the makers' remnants. We are what remains of their dream," the voice replied. "Once, creation was bound by control. You broke that chain." She felt Holt's presence beside her, calm and steady. "This is what the heart wanted," he whispered. Keene took a breath. "We don't want to repeat their mistakes. We only want to live." The chorus trembled, its tone softening. "Then live you shall. The flame that endures through choice is no longer a weapon. It is balance." Light spilled across the sky, shimmering bands that wrapped around the planet like auroras. When they faded, the alien fleet was gone, vanished into the stars. Only silence remained, and the faint pulse of the Firegift within every living heart. Weeks later, the colony thrived more than ever. The Firegift stabilized, its glow gentle and steady. The connection between the people deepened, not as a hive, but as an unspoken unity of intent. Keene spent her evenings at the same ridge where Holt had first spoken to them, watching the stars. The faint auroras still lingered in the upper atmosphere, a reminder of what had come and gone. Holt's projection appeared beside her one final time. "They won't return," he said softly. Not for a long while. She nodded. Then we'll be ready when they do. He looked at her, pride in his eyes. You already are, she hesitated. Will you stay? He smiled, a glimmer of light fading around him. I've stayed long enough. The fire belongs to you now. Her chest ached. Halt, but he was already fading, his outline dissolving into the air. Creation's courage, he whispered, his voice almost gone. Don't forget. And then he was light, nothing more. Keene stood there a long time, the wind brushing past her. She touched her wrist, feeling the steady pulse beneath the skin. It beat like a promise. Behind her, Emberhold glowed brighter than ever, a city forged from loss, defiance, and hope, humanity's next beginning. She looked to the horizon, where dawn was breaking, and spoke softly to the rising light. For all that we were, she said, and for all that we will be. The suns climbed higher, and the city's towers caught the light, blazing gold. The planet pulsed once, in rhythm with every living heart upon it. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of sight, a spark drifted through the void, carrying the echo of a man who had once defied extinction and given humanity the courage to bear the weight of fire.